Let me start by giving you a little history of surface warfare warriors. And I use that phrase guardedly because surface warfare warriors normally are not warriors. I taught them at the Naval War College. I taught them at the Marine Corps War College. The Navy has several classes of citizens. They are basically surface warfare people like Bradley Cooper, and they are Airedales, people who fly airplanes off carriers, and they're submariners. And that's the order that I prioritize them. Submariners are squared away usually. They can be very dense and narrow, but they know their work and they know their job, and they never introduce their submarines into an environment not knowingly that they couldn't win in. The Airedales are pretty much dependent on the carriers and the tankers from the carriers, and so they have a reluctance to operate outside that environment, but when they're in that environment, tanked or otherwise, they're pretty deadly. Surface warriors are a curious bunch, especially the admirals. They really don't know war well at all. And since we haven't been in a naval surface war since World War II, really, they don't know it at all from experience. So the last person in my seminars I would trust to come up with a really good campaign plan or operational plan or any sort of opinion with regard to a conflict was a surface warfare officer. They just weren't competent to do it. Bradley Cooper is a perfect example of that. Now look at what he's doing. First of all, let me say that like his predecessor, the Marine, Guerrilla Marilla, he is locked into Israel. He is very much a product of the Israeli military machine and the way it grabs out certain officers, particularly flag officers, incorporates them in its body politic and indoctrinates them. So that's the first thing about him. The second thing about him is, as I said, he commands something he really doesn't understand, and that's those carriers out there. And let me just elongate that for a moment. The symbol of the American empire, most notable to the world today, most feared in the world today, especially by small countries like Syria and Afghanistan, and even though it was landlocked, and other countries like that with whom, many of whom we've been at war, I'm sad to say, the symbol of our might is that aircraft carrier. Ask yourself why even this surface warfare warrior has not brought a single aircraft carrier, the most powerful combat element he supposedly, the most powerful combat element he commands, into harm's way. Not brought it any closer than 1,000 nautical miles from the coast of Iran. What does that say about the empire? Because the only way he could marshal a really effective naval warfare campaign, which is what we're talking about here, and make it focused on the Strait of Hormuz is to bring those carriers in close where they can really be devastated. One carrier, 24 hours, two carriers, 72 hours, three carriers, indefinite air ops around the clock, as long as you can resupply them with ordnance and fuel. So he's got that. Why hasn't he brought it into play? He hasn't brought it into play because that symbol of the American empire, that incredible symbol to those people out in the world who've suffered from it or who know about suffering from it, would be sunk. It'd be sunk. The end of the empire in symbols would be high up on every newspaper in the world. American aircraft carrier with 5,000 souls on board sunk by the Iranians and a hypersonic missile or two. He's not going to do that. So until he's willing to generate that kind of combat power in that vicinity of the Strait of Hormuz, I don't take what he's saying seriously.
When you say you don't take what he's saying seriously, I think this whole war is something we would have never taken seriously, but yet here we are. So I think the big question is, do you think Trump would take him seriously?
I don't know what Hegseth is going to do to filter that information, nor do I know what Kane is going to do, but I do know this. General Kane is being harassed majorly by his other combatant commanders. These are the people who have war plans that they're responsible for in Honolulu, Indo-PACOM, in Stuttgart, European Command, And they are also for African Command and the other entities around the world that have responsibility for U.S. operational plans. Those plans are sourced with weapons. They don't have any weapons now. So they're pressing the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff with, I'm assuming, questions like this, because I've heard them before when we were doing the first Gulf War. What are you doing? You're using up all my weapons. I can't fulfill my responsibilities in my AOR. And by the way, PACOM, even then, was 35 countries. Now it's Indo-PACOM. They have a vast set of responsibilities. I can understand they're probably just every day twixing or messaging General Kane and saying, what are you doing? You're using up all my munitions. So he's got that pressure on him. He has to represent, as does Hegseth, but Kane really viscerally, the other commanders. So I'm imagining very strongly that he's pushing this to Trump and telling him, you can't keep doing this because you are bearing every other commander in our different complexes around the world of ammunition, including the guy who has to fight China over Taiwan. So this is getting very dangerous. And I'm sure the tension between, for example, the CNO, the Chief of Naval Operations, and Bradley Cooper and the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff is getting palpable. Trump notwithstanding, Hegseth notwithstanding, this military triumvirate here, the CNO, Chief of Naval Operations, the combatant commanders, and what's happening with Bradley Cooper in the Central Command is getting very, very tender inside the military. And it'll break out sooner or later. But the way to get it to really break out is to take one of those combatants down. Doesn't have to be a carrier, but it'd be more volatile if it were a carrier, but it could be a cruiser. And they have every means to sink these ships. And these ships are vulnerable and can be sunk. Talk about the empire taking a blow that would be on the front page of the New York Times, right side above the fold the next morning. That's it.
All right. So there's a lot of developments in the last week, and I'm going to mention them all to kind of get your bird's eye view of everything. You've got the strikes on the two ships in Egypt. A lot of people saying it's a false flag by Israel. I think it's more likely to be the Iranians sending a warning to the Americans. But you've got that on the two LNG carriers.
But the Iranians have denied it, and I believe them.
But every country, sometimes strategically, it would make sense to deny it. Every country denies things strategically at all times. There's no exceptions.
Less so Iran.
I'm sure.
Less so throughout this conflict, Iran, because they have nothing to gain from lying, and everything.
Maybe they don't want to. They don't want to escalate with Egypt because that would be
Bingo.
Egyptian people would see that as a hostile, as a hostility, as an attack on their territory. But they do want to send a warning to the Americans that we can strike your ships anywhere in the world. That's why I'm making that assumption.
You could, but I tend to believe the Iranians are on things like that very straightforward and very honest.
Yeah,
and there are other people that, what we've done here, Mario, is we essentially right now, and I've been talking about this for 10 months, we right now have a front that runs almost 10,000 kilometers from the Arctic Circle all the way down out to 1,000 miles and nautical miles out into the Indian Ocean. And along that front, we have two very noticeable, but others that aren't so noticeable. Look at what happened with Spain and Morocco, for example, yesterday. We have two major conflicts going on. One centered in Ukraine, which is being badly lost by Ukraine and the Europeans and Washington. And the other centered in Southwest Asia, which is being not quite as badly lost, but lost nonetheless, with no way out. Ukraine has a way out. This one has no way out, not for this president anyway. So you're looking at these things beginning to merge, which I've said all along. And you're looking at them beginning to merge because what they represent is a wall that people like Elon Musk and Peter Thiel and Robert Mercer and Charles Koch and a host of other people I won't name behind Trump, the so-called deep state, want to stop China. And they think that this wall they're building will stop China. I don't think it's going to stop them. They have so far succeeded in stopping the two Central Base Road Initiative railroads. and they're trying desperately to stop the ones in the south. But I don't think they're going to stop them. So this conflict has every possibility of merging more and more as the weeks go by, and gathering more and more players, some of which will be trying to make some hay while the sun shines, others of whom will have visceral arguments to enter into this fray. And we're going to wind up with a regional war for sure, and maybe a global one. And did I mention that several of these powers have nuclear weapons?
That was you kind of went to my next question, because we saw the Ukrainian strike on the ship, the Iranian ship in the Caspian Sea. Then we had then obviously the Ukrainian foreign minister apologized to Arachi, and then we got a report from the New York Times that the Iranians were preparing to fire a ballistic missile at the Ukrainian port as retaliation. One of my guests, Shrita Parsi, said to me he spoke to sources that said that Iran may still retaliate, but at the right time. They don't want to fall into Ukraine's trap and merge the two wars. And then I started thinking that what the, and a guest mentioned this to me as well, what this strike was just not a random strike by Ukraine. It's a warning by the US, because there's a report today the US is considering a full blockade of Iran, including a land-based blockade, not just a sea blockade. And the strike, as they consider this, that report came out today that this is being considered, and Netanyahu spoke to Trump about it, or Trump spoke to Netanyahu about it. The strike by Ukraine on the Iranian ship would be a warning that, hey, we can close the Caspian Sea on behalf of the US, which is a pretty scary warning if that's true.
Love to see them do that. Love to see them do that. I mean, and not as I would love to see them accomplish it. I'd love to see them try it. You want a full-blown war with Russia? Try it. Just try it. And what would you do if you wanted to landlock Iran? Impossible. But if you wanted to, you would absolutely need one country that is not about to join you, despite its fickle leader, Turkey.
Yeah.
He's making up his mind right now and being very dilatory about it and slow, but he's making up his mind which way he's going. And I don't think there's a whole lot of evidence that he's ultimately going to decide he's going to stay with NATO and the empire.
Well, he's getting these F-35s.
He's gaining an aircraft that has a 27% OR, 27% operational ready rate, cost a fortune, whose fortune is embedded in its logistics tail as well as the aircraft itself. And as I said, it will only fly 1 out of every 4 hours. Kind of like what we sold. We sold a lot of the Patriot systems to our allies. Are we going to go out now after they paid billions of dollars, some of them, for these complements of THAAD and Patriot? Are we going to go out and tell them that the real kill rate for these Patriot systems is less than 27%? What do you think our allies would think if we told them that? Now, of course, they can read the newspapers, they can listen to Ted Postall, they can see the videos and so forth, but we've been selling people pigs in a poke in many respects, especially with these air defense systems that were so highly billed. And we should have known from the first Gulf War, Mario, that the Patriot system didn't have anything like the kill ratio that Lockheed and RTX, at that time Raytheon, said it did. And now it's been even modernized versions of it have been proven to be less percentage in terms of kills.